Ever wondered what the world looked like 6,000 years ago? What Britain looked like 6,000 years ago? Well, in this video, we're going to take a step back in time to a pretty pivotal moment. This was a time when habitats and species had re-emerged after the last ice age, and Britain was a place that hadn't been disturbed yet by people. But it was 6,000 years ago that really marked the start of change, that really put us on this trajectory of, human influence over the British Isles and shaping it into how we see it today. Unfortunately, my time machine has broken, but in its place, we've got Harvey Tweets.
And then I also think about the smells in the sense of death, the oozing, rotting guts of a old bull aurochs that was killed, in a ding-dong battle.
So Harvey is one of the directors at Celtic Rewilding, a nature restoration organisation, and they're currently working on a very exciting project to bring back Britain's lost frogs, but we'll get more into that in just a minute. First, let's take a step back in time to the year 3975 BC. A little after 4 AM on June the 21st, the first light of dawn is beginning to illuminate an ancient temperate rainforest. Down in the valley, the river has been slowed by a network of beaver dams. Some are centuries old, and others are only just under construction. A mother beaver returns to an area of willow which has provided food for her and the generations before. Nibbling back the fresh shoots, she strips the bark as her young kits splash in the shallows. So beavers were widespread across Britain during this time. This is the time when there would have been far more beavers than there were people. That is, just think about that for a minute. Subfossil remains and Nordwoods show them in catchments from the River Thames in today's London, all the way up to the River Tay in Scotland.
We're probably talking about a time where beaver dams could have maybe stretched for a quarter of a mile in length in some places. We're talking about beavers being able to cut down entire areas of forest, family of beavers being able to manage a huge swathes of sort of riparian trees. Species that use their habitats would have been incredibly numerous. Elk are a species which are intrinsically linked to beavers and their habitat creation. But I think also we're talking possibly about pelicans. We know that in North America, the white pelican that's found there uses the abandoned beaver lodges as islands for it to breed on. It nests on riverine islands.
So I just want to put the year 3975 BC on hold for a minute and just bring it back to 2025. This year has been quite a hard year for me. I don't share it on the channel much, but back in April I had a close family member pass away, and just all of the struggles of modern life has often left me feeling unmotivated and at times completely lost. But I found recently that talking and sharing can really lighten this load that we carry, and that's why BetterHelp are the paid partner for this video. While I do talk to my friends and my family, it was actually speaking to a therapist on BetterHelp which kind of gave me this new avenue to heal. I'd never done therapy before, so I was curious to see if it could help me, and I'm just so glad that I did. For me, I think the biggest thing was being able to talk to not only a professional but also a stranger, someone outside of my family and friendship circles. Someone I'm just able to speak freely and openly to. I matched with a therapist within days and then booked a session straight away, and I feel like I've made a new friend. And the truth is, we never really know what people are going through. We don't often share our struggles. But if you're feeling like you just want to talk or have someone who can listen, I really recommend trying out BetterHelp. You can join me and millions of others around the world who are taking action to feel better. There's a link in the description and comments, or you can just head to betterhelp.com/leavecurious. and you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy. Thank you to BetterHelp for being the paid partner for this video. It's a little after 6 AM now, and the first full rays of sun break through the canopy. Filtering through an old oak's branches, each one is thick with moss and beard lichens that glisten like tiny mirrors. And for a moment, the whole forest seems to hold its breath in this golden light. But high in the shadows of the oak, another life awaits. A lynx, motionless. Its dappled coat melts into the bark and moss, eyes piercing, unblinking. Because below, a small group of red deer steps quietly through the ferns, the youngest lagging only just behind. The lynx drops soundlessly, a blur between branches. The forest stillness is broken in an instant. At this time, we believe that temperate rainforests would have covered around 1/5 of Britain, so along the entire western seaboard. And stealthy predators like the lynx would have climbed up to the tallest and oldest oaks in these forests and used them as a post to, ambush the deer and other creatures which were moving through these forests. And deer at this time, they behaved very differently to the deer which we have today in Britain.
One of the things that you would have encountered at this time would be tension, hair standing on edge, unknowingness of what beast is just round the corner. And so deer would have had to have been scared at every single stage in their existence. And that would have had incredible impacts on the landscape. So we often call it, everyone knows about it, the landscape of fear. But what does that look like? Well, it probably looks something like the landscapes that we see in Yellowstone today. And so you would have in some areas, especially the sort of more nutrient-rich areas, these incredible grazing lawns, as they're called, these areas where herbivores know that they're safe. But in the areas where deer know that they're going to be taken, this is where areas of rainforest would take root and form these incredible canopies of oak and hazel. And then there is, of course, the intermediary, that sort of savanna wood pasture landscape.
While forest cover and woodland habitats would have been immense and far more dominant than they are today, it's important to remember that they would have been just one element in this mosaic of other habitats. And wetlands and floodplains and rivers would have made up a large amount of Britain. It's nearly 10 a.m. and the forest is wide awake. At a pool's edge, a heron stands motionless. White cranes circle lazily overhead, their calls echoing. Also filling the air are the croaks and quacks of countless bright blue moor frogs, giving their position away to friend and foe alike. And climbing up through the thorny scrub are thousands of tiny little green frogs to recharge in the full warmth of the morning sun. And in the dead branches of the tallest oaks, two storks stand upon huge nests, intertwined in a bill-clattering courtship. And further upstream, a huge white-tailed eagle picks at the carcass of a dead elk, ripping off chunks of flesh before taking to the skies. Large carcasses like that dead elk, decomposition and carrion would have just been, a whole serving ecosystem in itself that is almost entirely lost in today's Britain.
It's just an incredible time of the day because it's when things are starting to warm up, especially our species which require warmer temperatures. One of those is the moor frog, and the males of this species turn this just most fabulous lavender blue in order to compete for the likes of females. And if there's enough males turning blue, the whole edge of the water body will turn this alien hue. It's just fantastic. As the sun starts to warm and starts to warm the bramble edges of the pond, we may see a little frog starting to climb up into the bramble, through the thorns, and maybe up onto one of the leaves in full sun. And that, of course, is the European tree frog. But amazingly, this species is adapted to bake itself. It can get up to temperatures of 40 degrees. It loves the heat, loves the warmth. Later on, you may start to hear the pool frog. It's a species which needs very warm temperatures in order to start its incredible mating call, its quacking call. This inadvertently gives their position away to a whole host of carnivores, one being the incredible white stork. The white stork is adapted in order to wade carefully through the water or around the edge of the lake or the pond and spear anything in its sight. Its crimson red beak almost looks like it's been stained by the number of kills that it's made over its lifetime. People think of storks as beautiful, hopeful species, of which they undoubtedly are, but they are at heart velociraptors.
It's now noon, and within a sunlight glade where wildflowers and knee-deep grasses push upwards, a herd of mighty auroch are moving through, grazing, shaping, and clearing. Towering and strong, they rip branches from trees, turn the soils with their hooves, leaving a riotous mess of dust, dung, and snapped branches behind them. As the midday sun beams down, they disappear into the deeper, darker parts of the forest. And behind them, beetles, butterflies, and other small creatures fill the niches which they created. A little later, a brown bear passes through, snuffling through the undergrowth for berries. Unhurried and heavy in the warmth of the midday sun, she reaches up and smells the air. These open glades, as well as, like wood pasture where you've got some trees coming up, this would have been part of the mosaic of Britain's habitats, and it would have been large herbivores like the auroch which would have shaped these spaces.
We think also their dung would have been the facilitator of maybe species like the grass snake. The grass snake uses gardeners' compost heaps to incubate its eggs. 6,000 years ago, there ain't any gardeners. But also, I think it's what species were living on the aurochs as well themselves. You would have had a host of parasitic species, but also things like mosquitoes feeding on the clean blood of the aurochs. It's also things like magpies. We forget that magpies are actually adapted to live on the backs of species like this, that they're adapted for riding the backs of aurochs. They're an ecosystem in themselves, both facilitating what the vegetation would be like, but also the species around them.
The brown bear, this really is another one of our lost ecosystem engineers in Britain. It would have really thrived in these kind of like open habitats, foraging for berries, fruits, beetles, like carrion dead creatures, living creatures. I mean, if you're a bear, you're not that fussy, are you really? You'll probably take anything that you can get your hands on. Paws and claws. Bears don't have hands. That would be kind of freaky if they did. It's now mid-afternoon, and within a small clearing beside the river, a handful of people work quietly in the shade. A woman grinds grains between two smooth stones. The steady rhythm echoes through the still air. Two men sit nearby, lashing a polished axe head to its wooden shaft, the sinew creaking as it tightens. Smoke drifts lazily from a fire, carrying the smell of ash and roasted fish. A child crouches at the water's edge, watching dragonflies skim and hover, wings flickering blue in the sunlight. So around this time, people were part of what archaeologists call the Neolithic or the early Neolithic period. And as we've said, this was a time of huge change for people. This was a time when, we were beginning to multiply, and that was because we were shifting away from being a hunter-gatherer species to something which was a little bit more settled, and practicing, agriculture on a small scale. I think it's quite easy to romanticize this period of time of, what would it have been like to have been a human then, to have been so reliant upon and so within nature. But I think the reality is that any human that you send back today, back then, is just, we're going to struggle. And we probably wouldn't survive, and many didn't.
We undoubtedly live in the best time in human history, if people would believe that. But at the same time, I think we've got to understand the way in which people interacted with their environment, and probably rekindle a bit of that wilder spirit back, I guess.
It's now the evening, and the light softens as twilight seeps into the forest. A family of wild boar roots through the undergrowth, a robin following close for grubs before nightfall. And in the fading light, a wolf's howl echoes. Everything falls still. Night settles. Greens turn to silvery shadows. Glowworms light the twisting oaks. Moths dance in the air, and bats flicker through the dark. Across the wetlands, tree frogs begin their deafening chorus, and from a hollow, an eagle owl opens its glowing orange eyes.
This is the dominion of one of the most incredible apex predators the earth has ever seen, the grey wolf. A species which lives from the Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest. An animal that has conquered virtually every part of the globe. There probably were deer specialists, maybe taking aurochs occasionally, but it's a time where animals have got to hunker down because this predator is out. Shrieking, crying, croaking, whatever you want to call it, the European tree frog, a species that is inconspicuous in the day, but by night is the loudest amphibian in Europe. This incredible species where just in a hectare of wet ground maybe 1,000 males can all be simultaneously calling.
The last of the summer light has now faded. Moonlight glows through a fine drizzle, tapping softly on leaves and hollow wood, 1,000 tiny rhythms blending into one. An otter slips through the shallows, ripples glinting behind it. A tawny owl calls once. Frogs and midges answer from the pools below. And somewhere deeper in the forest, a wolf lifts its head to listen, then melts back into the darkness. In a sheltered cave, people sleep beside dying embers as the rain drums down. The forest is breathing, the earth is turning through another night. You know, looking back to this time, while it does feel wondrous, you know, this video isn't necessarily about nostalgia. You know, I often think with rewilding and nature restoration, it's not about replicating the past, it's about being guided by the past so we can, you know, reimagine modern landscapes to have, you know, an essence of what it was like back then, of what might return. And it's people like Harvey at Celtic Rewilding which are really working to bring back these species, and they're actually working on a very exciting project to bring back some of those frog species which we spoke about in this video.
And what we're doing at Celtic Rewilding is launching the Lost Frogs project. This is a project to bring back 3 species of frog that would and should have been here if it wasn't for the adverse human impact. So that is the moor frog, as I mentioned, a beautiful blue frog that will just encapsulate peatlands. They need peat wetlands. And if we want to restore our peat wetlands as a form of maintaining biodiversity, but also combating the climate crisis, we think that the picture of blue moor frogs could really be the light at the end of the tunnel with that. With agile frogs, a species which is found in the woodland, we think that this would be a great food source for many woodland creatures, possibly even wild boar, funnily enough. But also the European tree frog. I think this species holds so much hope. It is clearly our most popular species. It's so visible, it's so loud. And we can get this back. We could have this back in our scrubby, wet areas of rewilding projects or beaver wetlands. And the amazing thing is that we could have these 3 species back. But we need your help. We're currently doing a GoFundMe to try and raise enough money in order to secure these species in Europe. We need to acquire some from Europe and bring them back to the UK.
Even if you can just make a small donation, they all add up and it starts to make a real difference. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like it. Leave a comment perhaps on what you want to see next here at Leave Curious, and if you haven't, subscribe. The very best way to support the channel is by becoming a member over on Patreon. That's linked on the screen along with the video if you would like to keep watching. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Leave Curious.